Hi, welcome to Meta Minutes, your bite-sized pieces of the Metaverse. My name is Rene from Valorem Reply, and today we're going to talk about developing Metaverse apps. And for this, I'm very honored to have a special expert and friend today, Jesse McCulloch. Hi, Jesse, and welcome to the show. How are you
Hey
today?
Renee, glad to be here. I'm doing good, and I'm excited to talk about the metaverse.
Awesome. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background as it relates to, Metaverse, AR, mixed reality, all of these things?
Yeah, I started off in this area. I guess coming up on 5 or 6 years ago now, when the Hololens One first announced, and I got super excited. Went out and bought my own Hololens One, and decided I was going to learn how to build AR. And then I started building a community around it because it was so new. There wasn't really one out there to get involved with. And then actually 4 years ago this week, I joined Microsoft to start doing our developer community relations activities regarding AR and VR and mixed reality, and so I am continuing to do that today. And now I'm working on the Mesh team, which is one of our tools at Microsoft that we're building to help people build on the metaverse.
Well, that sounds great. And wow, you remind me how time flies, right? Already 4 years since you joined
Yeah,
Microsoft.
it's
Gosh,
crazy.
wow. But like so much good things have happened since then. And yeah, you're really, really great in your role, what you're doing. But let's talk about some of our topics. First of all, a typical simple but also complex question. What is the metaverse for you and where do you see the potential?
Yeah, metaverse is an interesting topic for me because there's so much hype around it, and I'm not one of those people who really jumps in on the hype generally. My girlfriend will tell you it took me like almost 20 years before I read the first Harry Potter book, so I'm really slow in jumping behind the bandwagon on some of this stuff. But for me, like metaverse, I think is a point in time, you know, title that we're giving to this broader thing of just bringing more interactivity to our real world at some point, but to virtual worlds at this point, just because the virtual reality stuff is so much more prevalent and easy for people to access at the moment. But when I think back to the internet, which is really where all this gets kind of based in, if you went back to the 80s when it was like BBS bulletin board systems, we didn't call it the internet then. I didn't call it anything then because I was like 5 or 6 years old. But it's evolved into the internet, and even the internet of 15 years ago is not the internet of today. So I think the metaverse is just an extension of the internet. And as we grow into these new ways of interacting and building things that are connected to our world and to each other, we grow into this, super exciting area where you'll be able to have digital and real content interacting with each other, and being able to pull collaboration and social stuff in from people around the world in a much easier and more natural way than we do it today.
Yeah. And I think it's great what you're saying. Also, the reference to the beginning of the internet, right? Because like this is when what you hear a lot. It's like this is the new immersive internet, basically that we're seeing. Well, where we're actually helping to develop, kind of, right? Which brings us to the next question about app development and how to get started. So, if I would be a person that is trying to get started with building applications for the metaverse, where would you send me?
Now is like the most exciting time for this in multiple ways. Like for the first part, this is such a new area for us. Building these 3D immersive worlds and applications is kind of a brand new paradigm over the last, I'd say, 6 years, maybe a little bit longer than that for some people. But there's no experts. Like nobody's been doing this for 40 years and is the tried and true expert. So there's still plenty of room for anybody who wants to get involved to go out and do so. And the amazing thing is with the internet the way it is today, there's so many resources out there. You can go to YouTube and start learning something like Unity or Unreal or any of these real-time game engines, which is where a lot of the base of the metaverse is and will be. If you go to universities, are starting to have courses on building 3D experiences or mixed reality. Community colleges have a lot of game development and 3D art classes. And these are all important parts of it. I think it's really easy for us to focus on developers and bringing developers along to start building these things. But really, there's 3D artists who have a lot of skills in building the assets. I know that I can develop an application super easy, but it's going to look like stick figures and cubes and triangles just because I don't have the capabilities of doing the art part of it. Producers are generally something we think about in movies and game development. Somebody who kind of goes through and figures out what the experience is going to be like and builds towards that. I think that's going to be an important role as we start thinking more about how we tell stories versus how we just go interact with stuff. So I think there's just a ton of tools out there and a lot of resources right now, and it's super exciting because even things like WebXR, super low barrier to entry. Anybody with a browser on a phone can do WebXR, so you don't have to have all these expensive tools and stuff that are part of the world today. But I think as we transition in, it becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, and especially what you mentioned about the WebXR and the big progress we're seeing there. I think this is really amazing because, like you said, it first of all, like from development side, or like you said, it's not just developers, right? It's, well, let's say creators,
Yeah,
like, whatever background it is. And so, like, if I'm a creator, I can quickly build applications, in fact, with certain WebXR engines or platforms. And this is fantastic, but even, what is even better is, like we're saying, is it will run on a mobile phone. It will run on pretty much any platform, and so you have this super wide reach, and the capabilities are increasing quite dramatically, right?
yeah. I mean, web development is the largest kind of development out there today, and being able to bring that audience of creators and people in who can start building based on the technologies they know is super important.
Yeah. And another interesting thing is, of course, like when we look into low code, no code development efforts for even metaverse things. Like one example is, for example, Roblox, right? Like if you look at Roblox, a lot of folks like see it just as a game, like an online game for kids
Yeah,
mainly. But my kids, for example, like the older one, they play a little bit of it. But yeah, it's actually a low code, no code platform, right? You can build custom experiences on top of it, or actually in it, if you will. And great example, for example, Nike with Nike Land. You know what they did there, reaching 7 million people in like 2 months or something like this. This is incredible. I mean, just the reach, and the reach of the audience is incredible, but also what is really amazing is how easy it is to build. And kids can get started with this, and then they can move on to more, more I'm saying these are not good platforms, but or models, right? You can build amazing things, but at some point you might hit a roadblock or something, and then you will move on. But similar to what Microsoft is doing with the Power
yep.
Platform and all of this, right? Low code, no code efforts, right?
Yeah, and Power Apps and Power Platforms an interesting one because we're starting to see a few more pieces of mixed reality start entering there, where you can build experiences where you can bring like 3D models into your real space using like a phone or a tablet, and that's just kind of part of the platform and super easy to do. So it's exciting that people are able to build stuff again, low code, no code, just because they've got the tools super easy and super accessible.
Yeah. But also the other platforms like Snap, for example, or some other, like they have these creator tools, really really amazing. You can, without writing any line of code, you can get some pretty fancy AR effects done, and then you might be able to write a little bit of like script code also if you want. But yeah, I guess this is where a lot of new experiences we will see will actually be born, right? Like in these
Yeah,
toolings.
and it's nice because it starts to become a continuum, right? So there's some people who designing a snap filter may be as far as they ever want to go or need to go. But then somebody who starts there and wants to ramp up a little bit and can start to see where they want to go, has these tools to go in and they, like you said, maybe do a little bit of scripting, a little bit of JavaScript, and then kind of work your way up to some of these bigger platforms that require more time spent learning them. But you see this progression, available to people with, and they have the option to stop anywhere along there and still be successful and contribute.
Fully agree, and that actually also is a very important part of the whole app development and creator economy, if you will, is of course a community. Is like we're all part of a certain community. It depends on you where you identify and so on. But anyhow, in general, I mean, there's a large creator community or developer community, whatever you want to call it, right? Like, let's be inclusive. Let's say creator
Yeah.
economy, and so have been working since many years with the with the creator economy, especially as part of the mixed reality efforts, and HoloLens and so on, but also in a broader sense, like you did these hackathons and a lot of things. Like, you're super active in the community, of course,
Yep.
right? Like you were saying in the intro. And so my question is rather, is there anything particular you have seen in the community that has changed since you started like 5 years ago, like you mentioned, or maybe also in relation to the metaverse hype since last year? Like, what has changed since then? And a last sub question, if you will, are there any certain things you would try to change or make different?
Um, I mean, I think the hardest part for anybody who's in this space or been in this space is that we have hopes for where it will end up and how fast we'll get there, and it's just there's still a lot of hard computer science and hard physical science that we have to work around, to get to where I think this is where we all are looking forward to it being. I know when I first got my HoloLens, I was super excited. I'm like, this is going to be the next big thing next year, and that's just not as hopeful as I was, and maybe as dreamy as that was. It's not. It wasn't based in reality as much as I wanted to buy into the hype. And I think that's one of the great things about my position at Microsoft has given me a new perspective of just how much work it is that goes into all of this, and to kind of innovating in this space and building on it. So I'd say for people who are in the community, again, it's a great time to get started. Just have realistic expectations that we're not going to be in this Ready Player One world next year. Maybe in a few years from now, and we may decide that that's not really where we want to be. So I think when we look at things like open standards and being able to have open metaverses that you can traverse between, so it's not just one metaverse to rule them all, but you have a lot of choice in how you view the world and how you interact with it, is important. So I'd say on the community front, I think we're seeing an influx of people who are joining and from all sides of the world. In the last year with the metaverse hype and the way Web3 or blockchain or crypto or however you want to refer to it is bringing a lot of new people and a lot of new perspectives into the space, which is great. It brings that diversity of thought. I'm not sure where I exactly stand with all of it, but I think the more voices we hear and the more people we have in the community, the better it's going to be overall. To learn and grow in.
Yeah. No, I think this is an important point. Is like I was saying, like, there's a lot of different technologies and building blocks coming together for the metaverse. Like, we are coming like more from the kind of like AR, VR, spatial computing kind of a world, mixed reality, and so on. And then you have also, of course, like folks that come more from a coloration background, right? Or folks that, like you said, more from a crypto, like decentralized platform background, or Web3 and or NFTs and so on, right? And it's all coming together somehow, because these are all the building blocks, right? We have like spatial computing, computer vision, AI for these advanced capabilities with these devices, and then we have, of course, the whole kind of decentralization with blockchain and ledger technology there, and 3D rendering, and in general, of course, all of this coming together, and of course, also massive computational power is required, right? Also, cloud folks or joining the bandwagon, if you will, like Azure services and so on that are required, because like, just be honest. I mean, if we want to have these large online worlds to a realization where it can scale up, this requires a lot of computational power,
Oh yeah,
Rene.
for sure. And if you think through it, and I'm not even pretending that I have all the answers, but if we want devices to be similar to like the pair of glasses that you're wearing, um, having a GPU and a CPU and all of the stuff that's required to render, you know if we're gonna have all that stuff in a pair of glasses like that, we have a long, long way to go of how we build, that kind of technology. The other option is we think about pervasive high speed internet through 5G or future technologies. And then you start thinking about, off render or offloading all of that compute and render to the cloud and just streaming it down. That's another whole area where we're seeing a lot of advances from multiple companies. If from our side, I think the precursor to this is like the Xbox game streaming, where you can, we spin up your game on an Azure server somewhere and do all the rendering and compute there, and just stream it down with hopefully low latency, and you can play your Xbox games on a tablet or a phone or where, even your computer browser. But thinking forward to how that brings into, the offerings and being able to have devices that are smaller and much more socially acceptable. It's all coming together slowly but surely, and we'll get there.
Absolutely, and you make a good point. I think really the key enabler is like having smaller form factors, and yeah, the challenge is just like how small can you make it with still having the performance. And I think what will be a big enabler is the advancements we see with AI deep learning models, in particular with neural radiance fields and this kind of neural rendering, which is a whole different approach to 3D rendering in general, instead of like scanline based rendering or so on, right? You can interpolate, and in an essence, it's like what I'm sometimes saying is like, the AI models are basically really, really good compressors. And you can compress a lot of data in it, and it can interpolate. And, just like we as humans interpolate certain things, which sometimes you might say these are assumptions,
Yep.
right? but they are really good. And I think it will be key enablers, and where you can just take a few signals, like recent paper I've seen, just using the head pose and two controller poses to basically fully get a body pose interfere with interference from that AI model. And just with these little signals, you can actually create very realistic things. And probably this will be also a key enabler to actually make it happen at scale.
Yeah, I think the hard part for you and me is like we like to be generalists and have some knowledge of all this stuff, and it's just becoming bigger and bigger and harder and harder to be able to keep track of it all and keep on top of it all because it's just moving so fast.
Yeah. And another interesting thing when we talk AI for a moment, like the whole diffusion models approaches, right? Like this stable diffusion, DALI, Midjourney, and well, you name it. Like all of these, and in general, generative AI approaches. I think this is also a key enabler for making a lot of these, also the creator economy, right? Like you were saying, I'm just saying, right? It's very hard for me to make a 3D model that is more than a cube or a sphere. I mean, but maybe capsule and a torus, these.
Yeah,
But the rest is tough. But we're getting there where we have generative AI with basically text to image, where you give a text prompt and it generates an image out of this. And there's already some early versions we're seeing with 3D. Like, I want a 3D model of a donut, or well, donut is easy because it's tourist. I want a 3D model of a chicken or
right.
something, and then you get a model of a chicken, right?
Yeah, for my birthday, somebody took my one of the MVPs actually took my profile picture off of Twitter and did it as a mutant Simpsons character, and they based off my picture and they sent it to me, and it was actually pretty funny how well it did it in a really humorous way. And I think all that generative technology is super awesome and super fun to play with. I think the harder part is thinking through the way we think about the ethics and ownership and contribution, right? Because all of these models are built off of somebody's work previously that we've trained all these models on. And so, how do we use it responsibly so that we're making sure that we get permissions to use all those images and kind of give attribution where it's due. And also, how do we keep from you know uh, making those skills so commoditized that people can't make a living doing them. It's super easy for me to go out and do a generative AI and get a 3D model. And maybe that's where I'll decide to stop because that's my, the low bar that I have. Whereas
Yeah.
if I had went and hired a 3D artist to go do it, I'm contributing to the larger overall economy of building in this space.
Yeah, it's a very good point, right? This is the whole controversy around generative AI, and I talk with a bunch of folks, like also artists and designers and so on, and some are split
Hmm.
between, but like I got a really nice kind of analogy from someone that basically said it's a similar like when photography came along, right? Like painters were basically saying, "Oh, they are cheating; they're just taking photos." Right?
Yeah.
And so now it's also an art form, of course,
Yep.
photography. And no one's saying like they're cheating anymore or things like this. So what I'm trying to get to is like what I heard from a couple of folks of, and because like you're fully right, like what was original artwork then? But the thing is, like these models are not like stealing someone else's work. They make new
Right.
stuff. And the point is like what they were saying, it's basically another tool in the tool belt, and it will make certain mundane tasks easier because like you're saying, I'm pretty sure like although we have these big advancements and you can quickly like for prototyping you can quickly get some 3D models, like having really good topology and all these texturing and all of this stuff requires very skilled people that have a very good training behind them for many years. And I don't think we will get to this kind of high quality, so I don't think it will cause a lot of job loss in that particular sector, but I think it's rather kind of another tool in the tool belt to be used by real artists,
Yeah.
right? That need the creativity and the idea.
Yeah. I think it's like anything with technology. There's the utopian view and the dystopian view, and we could go either way with it. And hopefully, there's more of us who lean towards the utopia versus the dystopia, and we end up in the right place.
I'm all in for that. Well, thank you so much, Jesse. We are already at the end of the show, but we could talk for many more hours. But anyhow, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. Very much
Yeah,
appreciated.
great to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, and thanks everyone for joining us today for yet another episode of Meta Minutes, your bite-sized pieces of the metaverse. Watch our blog, follow our social media channels, subscribe to the YouTube, and of course, visit our websites to view all the previous episodes. Until then, take care and see you soon in the metaverse.